My brother handed me a $70,000 invoice for family estate upkeep, telling me to step up or be banned from Thanksgiving. He didn't know I had secretly bought the property years ago. I accepted his ban, then legally evicted him during dinner. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. I was lying in a hospital bed, the sterile smell of antiseptic stinging my nose, when my phone buzzed with the notification that would end my relationship with my family. I wasn't dying, but I felt like I had been run over by a truck. I had just undergone an emergency appendectomy after collapsing in the middle of a deposition. Being a partner at a high-stakes real estate law firm meant that stress was my baseline, but my body had finally forced a hard reset. I was groggy, in pain, and alone. My fiancé, who was currently on a business trip in Tokyo, was frantically trying to get a flight back. But for now, it was just me and the IV drip. I had texted the family group chat, consisting of my mother, Josephine, my older brother, Jack, and his wife, Vanessa, 4 hours ago to tell them I was in surgery. Response: radio silence. Actually, that's not true. There was a response. It just wasn't the one any decent human being would expect. My phone screen lit up. It wasn't a get well soon text. It wasn't a is everything okay message. It was an email notification from Jack. The subject line read, urgent, estate maintenance and reimbursement. I blinked, trying to clear the anesthesia fog from my vision. I tapped the screen with a trembling finger. There was no greeting, no inquiry about my appendix or my recovery. There was just a PDF attachment and a short, curt message. Lydia. See attached. As discussed, the house is falling apart. Vanessa and I have been fronting the costs for the last year to keep Mom comfortable and maintain the legacy Dad left us. We can't carry this alone anymore. Since you're doing so well for yourself in the city, it's time you stepped up like Dad did. We expect the transfer by the end of the month. Don't make me chase you for this. Jack. I opened the PDF. It was an invoice. A literal, itemized invoice created in some basic accounting software. Master bathroom renovation, Italian marble, $22,000. Wraparound deck expansion, composite material, $35,000. Landscaping and curb appeal update, $8,000. General labor and management fees, payable to Jack, $5,000. Total due, $70,000. I stared at the number until the pixels started to blur. $70,000. He was billing me $70,000 for renovations on a house I didn't live in, for upgrades I hadn't approved while I was recovering from surgery. The audacity wasn't just in the money, it was in the phrasing. Like Dad did. Jack knew exactly which buttons to push. He knew that our father was a saint in my eyes, a man who worked himself into an early grave to provide for us. Invoking his name to extort money from me while I lay in a hospital bed was a new low, even for Jack. I dropped the phone onto the sheets, a bitter laugh bubbling up in my throat that turned into a wince of pain as my stitches pulled. They didn't care if I was okay. They only cared if my bank transfer went through. I looked out the window at the gray city skyline, feeling a coldness settle in my chest that had nothing to do with the hospital air conditioning. I realized then that the check they were waiting for wasn't coming, but something else was. The betrayal wasn't the invoice. The betrayal was the realization that to them, I wasn't a sister or a daughter. I was just a line of credit, and they were about to find out what happens when the bank forecloses. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. The next 3 days were a blur of recovery and simmering rage. I was discharged 48 hours later, still moving slowly, clutching a pillow to my stomach every time I coughed. I took an Uber home to my quiet, empty apartment. My fiancé, bless his heart, had FaceTimed me during his layover, furious that he couldn't be there, but I told him to stay put. I needed the silence. I needed to think. I didn't reply to Jack's email immediately. My silence, apparently, was interpreted as insolence. On the second day of being home, while I was sitting on my couch with a heating pad, my phone rang. It was Josephine, my mother. "Hi, Mom," I said, my voice raspy. I waited for it. I waited for her to ask how I was feeling. "Lydia," she started, her voice tight with that specific tone she used when she wanted to play the peacemaker, but was actually just doing Jack's bidding. "Jack tells me you haven't responded to the invoice." I closed my eyes, pinching the bridge of my nose. "Hello to you too, Mom. Yes, I'm still in pain, thanks for asking. The surgery went well." There was a pause on the other end, a brief, awkward silence where she at least had the decency to feel momentarily ashamed. "Oh, honey, you know we're worried. But Jack is. He's under a lot of pressure. The house is a lot of work. He's just trying to keep things nice for the family, for us." "For us?" I repeated, my voice rising slightly. "Mom, he put in a $22,000 marble bathroom. That's not maintenance, that's luxury. And he wants me to pay for it." "He's the man of the house now, Lydia," she said, reciting the line I had heard 1,000 times since Dad died. "He knows what's best. He says the property value needs to be maintained if we're going to keep Dad's legacy alive. You know how much that house meant to your father." "Dad didn't believe in spending money he didn't have," I countered, the painkillers making my filter thinner than usual. "And Jack is asking me to foot the bill for a deck I will never use." "Well, maybe if you visited more," she snapped, her tone shifting from martyr to accuser. "Vanessa says you're too busy with your fancy lawyer friends to care about family anymore. They're just asking for your share, Lydia. You have so much of it. Why are you being so stingy with your own brother?" Stingy, the word hung in the air. I looked around my apartment. It was nice, yes. I worked 80-hour weeks for it. I missed birthdays, holidays, and dates for it. I sacrificed my health for it, literally, considering I was answering this call while recovering from stress-induced organ failure. "I'm not paying it, Mom," I said firmly. "I didn't authorize the work. I don't live there. I'm not paying for Jack's renovation fantasies." "Then you're breaking this family apart," she said, her voice trembling with weaponized frailty. "Jack said if you don't contribute, you clearly don't respect him or this family. He said maybe it's best if you don't come for Thanksgiving this year. If you can't act like family, you shouldn't eat like family." The threat landed with a thud. Thanksgiving was the one time of year I forced myself to go back. It was the anniversary of the last time we were all together before Dad passed. Banning me from that was the ultimate excommunication. "He said that?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. "He's hurt, Lydia. Just pay the bill, apologize to him, fix this." I didn't say anything for a long moment. I looked across the room at my home office, specifically at the locked filing cabinet in the corner. Inside the bottom drawer, in a fireproof safe, sat a thick manila envelope. Jack and Josephine thought they were the gatekeepers of my childhood home. They thought that because Jack lived there, and Mom lived in the in-law suite, and they played Lord and Lady of the Manor, that they held all the cards. They thought my only role was to send checks to keep the lights on. "Okay, Mom," I said softly. "I understand where you all stand." "So you'll pay," hope rose in her voice. "I'll handle it," I said. "Tell Jack I received the message loud and clear." I hung up before she could say anything else. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, I stood up, walked slowly to my office, and unlocked the cabinet. I pulled out the file labeled Element Properties LLC. My hands shook slightly, not from fear, but from adrenaline. They had forgotten one crucial thing. The gatekeeper isn't the person who lives in the house. It's the person who holds the keys. To understand why I did what I did, you have to understand the history of the house, and the history of Jack. Our father was a good man, but he wasn't a businessman. He was a dreamer. He built that house with his own hands 30 years ago, a sprawling Victorian-style farmhouse that was far too big for our needs but perfect for his ego. When he died 5 years ago from a sudden heart attack, he left behind a massive void and an even massive amount of debt. Jack was 37 at the time. He had just been fired from his third sales job in a row, something about creative differences with management, which usually meant Jack refused to follow basic instructions. When Dad died, Jack immediately swooped in. He wore the black suit, he shook the hands at the funeral, and he loudly proclaimed to everyone that he would take up the mantle. He moved his wife, Vanessa, and their 2 kids into the main house to take care of Mom. Mom, paralyzed by grief, was grateful. She thought Jack was stepping up. I knew better. I was the one going through Dad's papers. I found the second mortgage. I found the maxed-out credit cards. I found the foreclosure notice that arrived 2 weeks after the funeral. Dad had been drowning, and the house was the anchor pulling him down. I tried to tell Jack. I sat him down at the kitchen table, the foreclosure notice in my hand. "We have to sell," I had said. "The equity is gone. The bank is taking it in 90 days. Jack had slammed his fist on the table. "We are not selling Dad's L. Legacy, you just want to cash out. You always were cold, Lydia. This is our home." He refused to listen to reason. He refused to look at the numbers. He just kept shouting about legacy and honor. I couldn't let Mom lose her home. She was too fragile. So I did something drastic. I used every penny of my savings, leveraged my partnership track bonus, and took out a personal loan. I created an anonymous LLC, Element Properties, and I approached the bank directly. I bought the debt. I bought the house out from under the foreclosure proceedings. Technically, Element Properties LLC owned the house. I was the sole member of that LLC. I drafted a lease agreement, a standard rental agreement. I presented it to Jack and Mom, telling them that an investor had bought the debt, but was willing to let them stay indefinitely as long as they covered utilities and basic upkeep. I told them I had negotiated it for them. I never told them I was the investor. Why? Because Jack would have lost his mind. His ego couldn't handle his little sister saving him, and Mom would have felt guilty. I wanted to preserve their dignity. I wanted them to feel secure. So I let them believe some benevolent, faceless corporation owned the paper and that they were the masters of the domain. For 5 years, I paid the property taxes. I paid the insurance. I paid for the new roof when it leaked in 2021. I did it all silently, through the LLC management portal, while Jack played the big shot. Jack, meanwhile, had settled into his role as the lord of the manor. He was currently a regional sales manager for a solar panel startup. From what I gathered, his job mostly consisted of posting LinkedIn motivational quotes and buying suits he couldn't afford. And then there was Vanessa. Vanessa, who listed her occupation as full-time boy mom and lifestyle curator. She treated the house, my house, as her personal content studio. She was constantly posting photos of their renovations, their estate, their success. They lived rent-free. All they had to do was pay the electric bill and mow the lawn. And yet, every few months, Jack would ask me for a loan for a business opportunity or a medical emergency for the kids that turned out to be a vacation to Disney. I usually gave in for Mom's sake. But this invoice, this $70,000 demand, this was different. I pulled up Vanessa's Instagram on my laptop. There it was, a reel posted yesterday. The camera panned over a gleaming new deck, the wood pristine and expensive. Jack was standing on it, holding a glass of scotch, looking out over the yard like a plantation owner. Caption, "Big things happening at the estate. Hubby making sure the family legacy shines. Blessed renovation legacy, boss life." I zoomed in on the photo. The deck was massive. It was easily a $30,000 job. And the marble bathroom? I scrolled down. A selfie of Vanessa in a bathroom that looked like it belonged in a 5-star hotel. Caption, "Self-care sanctuary. You have to invest in yourself." They weren't maintaining the house. They were upgrading it to fuel their delusions of grandeur, and they were handing me the bill because they thought I was too weak to say no. They thought I was just the sister who wrote checks. They didn't realize I was the landlord. I looked at the date on the invoice. I looked at the threatening email. Don't bother showing up for Thanksgiving. Okay, Jack, I whispered to the empty room. I won't show up for Thanksgiving, but neither will you. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. My old mentor from law school, who now specialized in landlord-tenant disputes and high-conflict evictions. Hey, Sarah, I said when she picked up. I have a job for you, it's personal, and I need it executed on a holiday. The next morning, I didn't go to the office. Instead, I sat in the sun-drenched conference room of Sarah's boutique firm, Vanguard Litigation. Sarah, a woman who could terrify a grizzly bear with a single raised eyebrow, was reviewing the documents I had brought. The original deed transfer to Element Properties, LLC, the lease agreement Jack and Mom had signed 5 years ago, and of course, the ridiculous $70,000 invoice. Sarah slid the invoice across the mahogany table, tapping a manicured fingernail on the total. Let me get this straight. Your brother, the tenant, decided to perform major structural renovations on a property he does not own without written consent from the landlord, who happens to be you and is now billing you for the privilege. He doesn't know I'm the landlord, I reminded her, pouring myself a glass of water. My side still ached from the surgery, but the pain was dull compared to the sharp clarity of my plan. He thinks Element Properties is some faceless investment group that I manage communication with. He thinks he's billing his little sister for her share of the family duty. It's breathtaking, Sarah mused, flipping through the lease agreement. Truly. Look at Clause 14, Section B. Tenant shall not make any material alterations, additions, or improvements to the leased premises without the prior written consent of the landlord. And here, Clause 22, unauthorized alterations become the property of the landlord immediately, and tenant may be liable for costs to restore the premises to original condition. He handed me the evidence on a silver platter, I said. He documented his own breach of contract. So what's the play? Sarah asked, leaning back. We could just send a cease and desist, or a simple no. Why the nuclear option? I looked down at my hands. Because he told me not to come to Thanksgiving, because he's using Dad's memory to manipulate Mom, and because... I hesitated, then pulled up a credit report I had run on myself that morning. Because I did a little digging before I came here. Jack didn't just invoice me. He tried to open a line of credit in Dad's name last week. It was flagged because, well, Dad is deceased, but the attempt was made. Sarah's eyes narrowed. Identity theft against your late father. He's desperate, I said. You don't build a $30,000 deck when you're broke unless you're trying to flip the asset or impress someone. I need you to find out what he's hiding. If he's coming after me for 70 grand, he's in a hole much deeper than that. Sarah nodded, the predatory glint in her eyes sharpening. I'll have my forensic accountant look into his solar, business, and his personal liabilities. If he's living beyond his means, there's a paper trail. Meanwhile, what do you want to do about the house? I want him out, I said, the words tasting like ash and iron. He's had 5 years of a free ride. He's abused the property, he's abused my mother's finances, I'm sure of it, and now he's trying to extort me. Prepare the notice to quit, but don't serve it yet. I need to know exactly how deep the rot goes before I cut it out. And the reason for eviction? Sarah asked, pen poised. Material breach of lease, unauthorized structural changes, and, I paused, thinking of the invoice again. Let's throw in failure to maintain quiet enjoyment. He's creating a nuisance. I want the paperwork bulletproof. I want it so tight that even if he hires the best lawyer in the state, which he can't afford, he'd still lose in summary judgment. Done, Sarah said. I'll have the background check on Jack and Vanessa by tomorrow. Go home, Lydia. Rest. Let me sharpen the knives. I left her office, but I didn't feel relieved. I felt a heavy, sinking dread. I was initiating a war. But as I checked my phone and saw a new Instagram notification from Vanessa, a video of them toasting champagne on the new deck with the caption, "Living the life we deserve," my resolve hardened. They were celebrating on the deck of the Titanic, and they had no idea I was the iceberg. The initial confrontation happened 48 hours later. I was back in my apartment, reviewing the dossier Sarah had sent over. It was worse than I thought. But before I could fully process the financial horror show in front of me, my phone rang. It was Jack. I hit the record button on my laptop. Legal in our state as long as one party consents, and I certainly consented and put him on speaker. "Lydia," he barked, "no hello, no how are you?" "Jack," I replied, keeping my voice even. "I assume you're calling about the invoice." "I'm calling because the money isn't in my account," he snapped. "I told you, the contractors need the final draw. I put my reputation on the line with these guys. They're expecting payment." "Your reputation?" I asked, looking at the report on my screen which showed 3 pending lawsuits from previous contractors he hadn't paid. "Jack, I never authorized these renovations. I never agreed to pay for a marble bathroom. That's not maintenance. That's a remodel." "It's for the value of the estate," he shouted, his voice cracking with that specific arrogance of the incompetent. "You sit there in your high-rise apartment, hoarding your money, while I'm down here in the trenches taking care of Mom and the house. You owe this to us. You owe this to Dad." "Dad wouldn't have spent $70,000 on a deck when he didn't have a retirement fund," I cut in. "And neither will I. I'm not paying the invoice, Jack." The silence on the other end was deafening. It was the silence of a man who had already spent the money he didn't have. "You're not paying?" he asked, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "No, I'm not. And frankly, I'm concerned. Did you get permission from the property owner to build that deck?" I threw the bait out, waiting to see if he would bite. "The owner," Jack scoffed. "Please, that LLC? They don't care what we do as long as the check's clear. I handle them. I'm the point man. I told them about the upgrades and they were thrilled. They said it increases the equity. Oh, don't try to hide behind legal technicalities, Lydia." My heart hammered against my ribs. He lied. He blatantly, effortlessly lied. I was the owner. I was the LLC. He had never spoken to anyone. "You spoke to them directly," I pressed. "You have that in writing." "Yes, I have it in writing," he lied again, digging his grave deeper. "I have a direct line to the managing partner. He respects what I'm doing here, unlike you." "Interesting," I said, making a note on my pad. "Fraudulent misrepresentation." "Well, if the owner is so happy with it, maybe they should pay for it." "You selfish *TCH, he spat. The veneer of the caring brother evaporated instantly. "You know what? Mom was right. You've changed. You think you're better than us because you have a law degree? You're nothing. And guess what? The invite is officially rescinded. Don't show your face at Thanksgiving. I don't want your negative energy around my family. We're going to celebrate our house and our success without you." "Jack," I said, my voice dropping an octave, deadly serious. "Be very careful. You are playing a game you do not understand." "I understand perfectly," he sneered. "I understand that you're out, and don't think you're getting a bedroom when you visit anymore. That's going to be my office now. Goodbye, Lydia." He hung up. I stared at the phone. He had just claimed to have spoken to me as the owner and received approval. He had just evicted me from my own property, verbally at least. I looked back at the dossier Sarah had sent. The financial desperation was clear, but there was something else in the file, something Sarah had flagged in red. Jack hadn't just stiffed contractors. He had taken a personal loan from a hard money lender, a legal loan shark, using the future inheritance of the house as collateral. He had shown them a forged will. A will that stated he was the sole heir and that the deed transfer was pending. He was committing active fraud, and if he defaulted on that loan, those sharks would come for the house. My house, Mom's home. The game had changed. This wasn't just about a deck anymore. He was putting the actual roof over our mother's head at risk of seizure by criminals. The week leading up to Thanksgiving was a masterclass in anxiety. I didn't sleep. I spent my nights coordinating with Sarah and a private investigator she recommended to cement the evidence of the forged will. I needed Mom to be safe. That was my priority. I called her on Tuesday, 2 days before the holiday. Mom, I said gently, I need to talk to you about Jack. Oh, Lydia, she sighed, sounding exhausted. He's so angry. He says you insulted him. He says you refused to help the family. Why can't you just send him something, even half, just to make peace? Mom, did you give Jack any money recently? I asked, ignoring her plea. There was a hesitation, a long, guilty silence. It wasn't much. He needed a deposit for the lumber. He said the bank transfer from his bonus was delayed. I just gave him access to the rainy day fund Dad left. My stomach dropped. The rainy day fund was her entire savings, about $40,000. How much, Mom? $30,000, she whispered. He promised to pay it back next week when your check cleared. He said you were sending the money for the renovation. I closed my eyes, tears pricking the corners. He had drained her. He had lied to her, telling her I was covering it to get her to front the cash. He had stolen her safety net to build a deck for his Instagram. Mom, I said, my voice trembling, I need you to listen to me. Jack is lying to you. There is no bonus, and I am not sending a check. Don't say that, she snapped, her defense mechanism kicking in. Jack is a good boy. He's trying. You're just jealous because he's managing the estate and you're not. He isn't managing the estate, Mom. He's destroying it, I shouted, losing my cool for the first time. He stole your money. He forged documents. He doesn't own the house. He does, she yelled back. It's his home. He's the man of the family. And if you're going to speak ill of your brother, then maybe he's right. Maybe you shouldn't come on Thursday. She hung up on me. I sat there, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. She was brainwashed. Grief and dependency had made her blind. She would never believe me if I just told her. She had to see it. She had to see him stripped of his lies in front of an audience. I called Sarah. Is the paperwork ready? I asked. Stamped, notarized, and ready for service, Sarah confirmed. Notice of lease termination, notice to quit, and a cease and desist regarding the fraudulent loan application. And the foreclosure rescue documents, the proof that I bought the house 5 years ago. All of it in a nice, heavy binder. Good, I said. I'm going to Thanksgiving. I thought you were uninvited, Sarah said. I am, I replied, staring at the photo of my father on my desk, but the landlord isn't. I'm not going as his sister. I'm going as the owner of the property, and I'm bringing security. Security. I'm hiring a private process server to accompany me. A big one. If Jack wants to play the man of the house, let's see how he handles a man with a badge and a court order. I checked Instagram one last time. Jack had posted again, a picture of the front door with a new, smart lock installed. Caption, keeping the circle tight. No negativity allowed in the sanctuary. Family first gatekeeper. He had changed the locks. He had physically locked me out of the house I owned. I felt a cold, calm rage settle over me. It was the kind of rage that burns clean. There was no hesitation left. No guilt. He had taken Mom's money. He had tried to steal my identity. He had weaponized my father's memory. Enjoy the deck, Jack, I whispered. It's the last time you'll ever stand on it. Thanksgiving Day arrived with a sky the color of a bruised plum. It was cold, the kind of biting November chill that seeps through your coat and settles in your bones. I sat in my car at the end of the long driveway, the engine idling. Beside me sat Mr. Henderson, a process server who looked more like a retired linebacker than a legal courier. He was silent, reviewing the paperwork one last time. My phone buzzed. It was an Instagram notification. I looked down. Jack had just posted. It was a photo of him standing in front of the front door, wearing a cable-knit sweater that I knew for a fact Mom had bought him. He was smiling that wide, politician smile, one arm around Vanessa, the other resting possessively on the doorframe. Caption, grateful for what matters most. A home filled with love, a legacy secured, and the strength to keep the negativity out. Thanksgiving head of household blessed. The hypocrisy was so thick I could almost taste it. He was standing in the doorway of a house I paid for, wearing clothes Mom paid for, bragging about excluding the person who kept the roof over their heads. I didn't just feel anger anymore. I felt a cold, clinical need for correction. I opened the comment section. My fingers flew across the screen. I typed the words I had been holding back for 5 years. That deck you're standing on, I own it, and the lock's already changed, or it will be in 5 minutes. Check your front door, Jack. I hit send. Ready? I asked Henderson. Ready when you are, ma'am, he grunted. I put the car in drive and rolled up the gravel driveway. There were 3 other cars there: Vanessa's leased SUV, Mom's sedan, and an old beat-up truck belonging to Vanessa's parents, who were apparently also invited to the feast I was banned from. We got out. I could hear laughter coming from inside. The smell of roasting turkey wafted through the air, triggering a sharp pang of nostalgia that I quickly suppressed. I walked up the steps to the new, expansive deck. It was, admittedly, nice work. Expensive work, my money at work. I reached the front door. The new smart lock keypad glowed blue. I didn't have the code, obviously, but I didn't need it. "Mr. Henderson," I said. He stepped forward and produced a drill. We weren't breaking in. As the landlord, I had the right to enter for emergency maintenance or lease violations, provided notice was given. The notice was in his hand. And since they had changed the locks without providing the landlord a key, Clause 9 violation, I was allowed to regain entry. The sound of the drill was loud, cutting through the holiday quiet. The laughter inside stopped abruptly. 30 seconds later, the door swung open. Jack was standing there, a carving knife in his hand, his face flushed with wine and indignation. "What the hell is going on?" he shouted. "Lydia, I told you." He stopped when he saw Henderson, who was 6'4" and standing with his arms crossed. "Happy Thanksgiving, Jack," I said, stepping past him into the foyer. The house was warm. The table in the dining room was set beautifully. Mom was standing by the kitchen door, her hands covered in flour, looking terrified. Vanessa was holding her phone, likely recording for her stories. Her parents sat at the table, forks halfway to their mouths, looking confused. "You can't be in here," Jack sputtered, following me. "I told you you're not welcome. This is my house. I'm calling the police." "Go ahead," I said, dropping my heavy leather bag onto the dining table. It made a loud thud, rattling the fine china. "Call them. I'd love for them to see the deed." "What are you talking about?" Vanessa piped up, her voice shrill. "Jack, get her out of here. She's ruining the vibe." "Mom," I said, ignoring Vanessa and turning to Josephine. She looked small, older than I remembered. "Mom, I need you to sit down." "Lydia, please," Mom begged, tears welling in her eyes. "Don't cause a scene. Jack has worked so hard." "Jack hasn't worked a day in his life regarding this house," I said. My voice rising. "Jack, tell them who owns this house." Jack's face went from red to pale. He looked at the paperwork on the table. He looked at Henderson. He knew. It's complicated," Jack stammered. "It's an LLC, I manage it." "It is an LLC," I corrected. "Element Properties LLC. And do you know who the sole signatory of that LLC is?" I unzipped the bag and pulled out the binder. I flipped it open to the Articles of Organization. I turned it around so everyone could see. "Member, Lydia Marie Sterling." The room went silent. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. "I bought this house 5 years ago, Mom," I said, looking directly at her. "When the bank was foreclosing, when Dad died and left us with nothing but debt. Jack didn't save the estate. I did. I bought the debt. I set up the lease. I have paid every property tax bill, every insurance premium, and every major repair for half a decade." That's a lie," Jack whispered, but his voice lacked conviction. "She's lying. She's trying to steal it from me." "Steal it?" I laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "I can't steal what I already own, Jack." I pulled out the next document, the invoice. "And this," I held up the $70,000 bill. "You sent me an invoice for renovations I didn't approve, on a house I own, using money you stole from Mom." "He didn't steal from me. Mom cried out, moving to stand next to Jack. I gave it to him. He said it was for lumber. He said you were sending the money back. I never agreed to send any money, Mom, I said gently. He lied to you. He took your $30,000, your life savings, and he spent it on a deck and a marble bathroom because he wanted to play rich on Instagram. There is no bonus coming, Mom. There is no reimbursement. He spent your safety net on vanity. Mom looked at Jack. She looked at his expensive sweater. She looked at the expensive wine on the table. Jack, she asked, her voice trembling, is that true? Does Lydia own the house? Jack looked like a cornered animal. It doesn't matter whose name is on the paper. I'm the one living here. I'm the one taking care of you. She's just a bank account, Mom. She doesn't care about us. I care enough not to rob you, I shot back. And I care enough to stop you from losing this house to loan sharks. I slapped the credit report and the fraudulent loan application onto the table. He tried to take out a hard money loan against the house, Mom. He forged Dad's signature. He forged a will. He was going to leverage this property for cash. And when he inevitably couldn't pay it back, because he has no job and no income, they would have come and kicked you out on the street. That is what your man of the house was doing. Vanessa gasped. She grabbed the paper. Jack, you said the solar business was booming. You said the loan was for expansion. It was, Jack yelled. I just needed bridge capital. You committed felony fraud, I said coldly, and that is why Mr. Henderson is here. Henderson stepped forward and handed Jack a thick envelope. Jack Sterling, Henderson said, his voice deep and resonant. You are hereby served with a notice to quit for material breach of lease, unauthorized alterations, and failure to pay rent. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. You're evicting me, Jack screamed. On Thanksgiving, I'm your brother. You ceased being my brother when you tried to bill me for your lifestyle while I was in the hospital, I said, my voice shaking with the adrenaline dump. You ceased being my brother when you stole Mom's retirement. You are a tenant, a bad one, and your lease is terminated. Mom, Jack turned to her, grabbing her arm. Tell her she can't do this. This is our home. Mom stood there, trembling. She looked at the papers. She looked at me, standing tall and resolute. And then she looked at Jack, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time in years. She saw the selfishness. She saw the desperation. She pulled her arm away from his grip. You took the money, she whispered. My rainy day money. You promised me Lydia sent it. Mom, Get out, she said. It was soft, but it carried the weight of a breaking heart. What? Jack blinked. Get out, she said louder. Get out of my husband's house. Get out of your sister's house. Jack looked around the room. Vanessa was backing away from him. Her parents were staring at their shoes. He had no allies left. Fine, he spat, throwing the carving knife onto the table. It clattered loudly against the china. Keep your damn house, it's a money pit anyway. Come on, Vanessa, we're leaving. He marched toward the door. Vanessa hesitated. She looked at the luxurious kitchen, then at her husband, who was currently being evicted and exposed as a fraud. Vanessa stammered. I think I'm going to go with my parents, Jack. Jack stopped at the door. He turned back, his face twisted in a rictus. Of hate, you'll regret this, Lydia. You'll die alone with your money. Maybe, I said, but I'll die with a clean conscience and a paid-off mortgage. He slammed the door so hard the walls shook. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of Mom sobbing into her hands. I walked over and wrapped my arms around her. She felt frail, like a bird. I'm sorry, Mom, I whispered into her hair. I'm so sorry. I didn't know, she sobbed. I didn't know. I know, I said, but it's over now. The fallout was messy, as these things always are. Jack didn't leave quietly. He trashed the master bathroom, the one with the $22,000 marble, before he finally vacated. He smashed the fixtures and poured cement down the drain. It was a final, petty act of vandalism that only served to confirm I had made the right decision. I pressed charges for the damages. It was the only way to ensure he faced consequences. Between the vandalism and the attempted fraud with the loan company, Jack found himself in a world of legal trouble. He avoided jail time by pleading out and agreeing to restitution, but his reputation was destroyed. He moved 2 towns over into a small apartment and got a job at a car dealership. We don't speak. Vanessa divorced him 6 months later. It turned out her stand by your man philosophy only extended as far as his credit limit. The hardest part was rebuilding with Mom. The betrayal broke something in her. She had idolized Jack for so long, using him as a replacement for Dad, that accepting his true nature was like mourning a second death. For the first few weeks, she stayed with me in the city. We spent long evenings drinking tea and talking, really talking, about things we had avoided for years. I told her about the stress of my job, about my fiancé, about how much I missed Dad too. She told me about her loneliness, about how Jack had made her feel useful by needing her money. We decided that the house was too much. It was a museum of memories that were becoming painful. It was too big for her and too far away for me to manage properly. So, 6 months after that Thanksgiving, we sold it. The market was hot. The renovations, ironically, did add value, though I had to pay to fix the damage Jack caused. We sold the estate for a significant profit. I took the proceeds and did 2 things. First, I reimbursed Mom every penny Jack had stolen from her, plus interest. I put it into a trust that I managed, transparently, so she would never be vulnerable again. Second, we bought a beautiful 2-bedroom condo for her in a senior community just 20 minutes from my apartment. It had a garden, a community center, and no stairs. Mom thrived there. She made friends. She started painting again. She stopped waiting for a man to tell her what her legacy was and started living her own life. Thanksgiving this year was different. It was at my apartment. My fiancé was there, finally back from Tokyo. Mom brought her famous sweet potato casserole. There was no drama, no invoices, no tension. We sat around my modest dining table, looking out at the city lights. I miss the old house sometimes, Mom admitted, taking a sip of wine, but I don't miss the worry. I know, Mom, I said, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. You're a good daughter, Lydia, she said, her eyes clear and bright. You stepped up, just like your father would have wanted. I smiled, and for the first time, the comparison didn't sting. I'm not Dad, I said softly. I'm just me. And that, she said, squeezing my hand back, is more than enough. I looked at the reflection in the window. I saw a woman who was tired, yes, but strong. A woman who had drawn a line in the sand and defended it. Jack had tried to use family as a weapon. He didn't realize that family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up when the roof is leaking. It's about who pays the bills when the lights go out. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is change the locks.